Boker Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is Bava Kamma Chaf Daled, Bava Kamma 24. We're going to start on the bottom of Chaf Gimel Amud Beis, on the bottom of 23b, we've been discussing the idea of a tam and a muad. Muad, if an ox is a muad when it gores, it pays full damages. And that comes from aliyah, that there's no cap on it, and it comes from the best of the mazik's property, as opposed to a tam, which is half damages, and there's a cap on it from the value of the animal. It's migufo. So the Mishnah says on the bottom of Kimon Beis, Ezu tam ve'ezu muad. What's the definition of a tam and what's the definition of a muad? Kol she'idubo Shlosha yamim, anything that's gored three times, that's a muad. Muad kol she'idubo shlosha yamim. Anything that's gored 3 days, 3 days, that's a muad. Betam mishiyachzer bo shlosha yamim. And a tam is when it goes 3 days being in contact with other animals and it doesn't gore. So that's that's considered a muad. That's the position of Rabbi Yehuda, whereas Rabbi Meir says a muad is sheyidubo shlosha pa'amim. Muad is something which a muad is something which they testify about it, that it's scored 3 times, and even Rashi says even on the same day. So even on one day, if it's scored 3 times, it's going to be considered a muad. The tam, and what's a tam? And the definition of a tam is anything which the children play with this animal and it doesn't gore. That's the position of Rabbi Meir. So the Gemara first says, my time at Rabbi Yehuda. Why does Rabbi Yehuda say it has to go over 3 days in order for it to be a muad? Amar Abaye says tamol, that's hot, because it says in the verse that it was something that gored mitmol shel shom. So timol means 1 day. Mitmol, the extra mem, means 2 days. And shalshom, that means 3 days. That's tlasav. And then it says its owner doesn't guard it. Asan unegicha revius. That comes out to mean you start to pay on the 4th goring. That's the position of Abaye. Rava says timol mitmol is chad. That the word mitmol, and it only refers to 1 goring. Shalshom is 2. Trey. And then you pay ha'inna. That means to say that now is when you're liable. So chayiv. So according to Rava, you pay on the 3rd time, or according to Abaye, you pay on the 4th time. Rabbi Meir, my time. And why does Rabbi Meir say that the goring is not 3 days but 3 times? Tanya, I'm a Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says on top of Chaf Daled and Aleph, that if you're paying when the goring happens over 3 separate days, if that makes you liable, for sure, if it all happens on the same day, for sure it's a very violent animal, and for sure you have to pay. So that's what Rabbi Meir says. When we're on the top of Chaf Daled Amud Aleph on 24a at the top, so they said to Rabbi Meir, they said to Rabbi Meir, no, that logic is wrong, because Zava Tochiach. Zava is a woman who has a flow, not part of her regular menstrual flow. And we know that the law of a Zava is that if she has it 3 times in one day, she's not going to be considered a Zava Gedola, which requires 7 clean days and a carbon. But if it happens over 3 separate days, then she's considered a Zava Gedola. So Zava Tochiach, Zava should prove that the law is not like Rabbi Meir, that if her sightings of blood are on 3 separate days, Tamea, she's going to be considered Tamei. But Kirva Riosea, but if her sightings of blood were all on the same day, Tahora, then she's going to be considered like she is Tahora. So Amar Lahen. So Rameir responds to them, Hare Omer, no, we say your logic is wrong, because the reason why Zava has that halacha that it's stricter for her over separate days, and not on the same day, because it says Vizos tumaso bizovo. This will be her tuma with her flow, meaning to say there's a specific word vizos that limits it to that specific day, to that specific law of a Zava, meaning the Zava herself is over 3 separate days. And that's to tell us that the male Zav is on sightings, but the female Zava is over days. So it's a specific Zeres HaKosov. So the Gemara first question is Rabbi Meir in that. How to know that the word vizos is coming to tell us that the law of Zava does not apply to sightings, but refers to days. Maybe it's to tell us that the zav itself is something that it doesn't apply. Maybe it's the zav who doesn't apply to days. Maybe that's what it's telling us, that the male zav is with sightings and not days. So the Gemara says, zovo is achar on keva. No, there's a different verse. Zovo. It says in the pasuk that one who has their flow for a male or a female. Ma kish zachar on a keva. It's to compare a male to a female. Ma and a keva biyamim. Just like a female is with days, av zachar biyamim. So to a male, the law also applies in days. Why don't we compare the female to the male? Ma zachar b'rios, af nekeva b'rios. And why don't we say just like the male is with sightings, also the female is with just sightings? The Gemara says no. Hamiyat rachmana v'zos. No, the Torah says that doesn't apply because it says the word v'zos. The Gemara says umara isa. Well, why do you derive like that? Why don't you say that it's the opposite, that applies to the male? Gemara says mistabra kai b'rios. No, it's logical to say that since the verse is talking about sightings, that's what is limiting. Mimai b'rios. Kai b'rios mimai yamim. So if it's referring to sightings of blood, why would it limit days? So therefore, Rameir defends his position that even though it's all on the same day, we're going to say that she is that Rameir is defending. Therefore, Rameir defends his position that a muad is somebody who does it 3 times, even on the same day. So the Gemara says. Tana Rabbanan. Ezu muad. What is the definition of a muad? This is the position we had in our Mishnah, dispute between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir. The Rabbi Yehuda says 3 separate days is a muad, and you go back from being a muad if over 3 days also, it turns it back to a tam. Whereas Rabbi Meir says a muad is 3 times, and you go back from being a muad to a tam if the ox plays with children and is still innocent. So Tana Rabbanan Ezo muad kol sheyidu bo shlosha yamim. Anything that the animal testify that it gored over 3 days. So this is a combination of Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda's position, because it says the tam is something which plays with children and it doesn't gore. That's the position of Rabbi Yossi. So he paskins like Rabbi Yehuda with respect to goring, and he paskins like Rabbi Meir with respect to reversing the goring. Whereas Rabbi Shimon says muad kol sheyidu bo shalosh pamim. Rabbi Shimon says a muad is anything that they said 3 times, like Rabbi Meir. When do we need 3 days? Only to return it from its muad state to its tam state. And Amar of Nachman, Amar of Ada Barabba, halacha Rabbi Yehuda by muad. We're going to say the law is like Rabbi Yehuda by muad, Rabbi Yossi modala, because Rabbi Yossi agrees with Rabbi Yehuda by muad that it's 3 days. Halacha Rabbi Meir by tam, and the law is like Rabbi Meir by a tam, that when a child plays with the ox and doesn't gore, that comes back to being a tam. Because Sharei Rabbi Yossi modelo. The law is like Rabbi Meir by tam, because Rabbi Yossi agrees to him. So normally Rabbi Rav Nachman, why don't we say the opposite? Rabbi Meir by muad, Rabbi Shimon modelo. Why don't we say the law is like Rabbi Meir by muad, that it's 3 times, because Rabbi Shimon agrees to him. Like Rabbi Yehuda by tam, the law is like Rabbi Yehuda by a tam. Sharei Rabbi Shimon Motelo. Why do we say the law is like Rabbi Yehuda by a time, that it's 3 times it has to go back 3 days, because Rabbi Shimon agrees to him? I'm only Anak Rabbi Yossi's view. And Rabbi Barabba says, I hold like Rabbi Yossi ni Muki imo, because Rabbi Yossi is something we had in Gittin already, if you remember. Now Rabbi Yossi, the logic is with him. He doesn't just say his reason, he usually explains it. So therefore Rabbi Yossi is somebody who we rule like. But we see from here, the definition of a tam is somebody as an animal that plays with children and doesn't hurt them. That's the definition of purity. Definition of evil is someone that hurts children. And we're seeing now. I was thinking about this when we see that the hostages are being returned, but who could take a baby as a hostage? That's the definition of evil. The Gemara says Ibayohu. So now the Gemara asks a fundamental question. This 3 days that Rabbi Yehuda says is definition of muad, is that Uyude Sora or Uyude Gavra? Is that the 3 days? Is that needed to make the ox considered to be a muad, or is that needed to make the man considered a muad? Meaning to say, what's the distinction between the question? What is the question about? let's say three groups of witnesses came on one day. So if we say it's to make the ox a muad, well, the ox did gore over 3 separate days. And so therefore we've established, even though the witnesses all come on one day, the ox is still a muad because it gored 3 separate days. But if it's to make the man a muad, well, the man only found out about it on one day. And so therefore the man needs 3 separate days or he knows about it to declare him a muad. Now, if all the witnesses come on one day, well, then it's a muad. If you say it's to make the man a muad, well, miyayid. Then he's not a muad because Meimer Amar, because he could say hashdu to come as sadubi. Now is when they are testifying about me. So this is my first day that I find out that I'm a muad. So what's the lachamai? Tashma. Gemara answers. Let's bring a proof from a brisa that the brisa says that the ox is the long brisa, and the proof is at the end. And the ox is not a muad until they testify about the ox in front of the owners. To testify in front of the court, but not the owners. In front of the owners, but not the court. It's not a muad until they testify about it in front of the owners and the court. Let's say two witnesses testified about the first time, and then two witnesses testified the second, and then two about the third time. Then we're going to say Arekan Shalosh Edios. We're going to say that there are three separate testimonies, but they're one set of witnesses with respect to the being impeached. Edim Zomamin. And what this means is that the law of Zomamin, I'll just say it outside for a minute. The law of Zomamin is that, like you tried to do, if you're discovered to be a false witness, like you tried to do, is what's going to be done to you, is how you're going to be punished. But their whole punishment will be different based upon whether or not all three witnesses are impeached, because all three sets are impeached. Because if only one set is impeached, then they, meaning to say the law for a muad is full damages, the law for a tam is half damages. So in order for you to be liable, each set, in order to be liable for muad payments, you need to have all three sets impeached. So that's what the Gemara is going to explain. If just one group of witnesses is impeached, so then we still have two witnesses that are good. So nobody's going to have to pay full damages there, because the one who was impeached only testified one time, so that was to make him pay half damages. If a second group is impeached, they're still all exempt from the full damages. That only the ones who are impeached have to pay half damages. If all three are impeached, and then all of them have to pay full damages. About this it says, now you shall do to him like he tried to do. Now here's where the Gemara brings its proof. Now, if you're going to say that we're declaring the ox to be a muad, then shapir, then it makes sense, because as the Gemara is going to explain, because if you're going to say that we're declaring the ox to be even if all that, as long as the ox scored 3 days, that's what we're trying to establish, then this whole brisa makes sense. But then we can understand this brisa, meaning to say that to make an ox we need 3 days, but to make a man just 1 day is sufficient. Then we could establish that this brisa is talking about where all the witnesses came on one day, and they said that they ox scored over 3 separate days, and that's why we could say that it makes sense to declare him a muad, because they can't say, "Oh, I only came to do half damages," because they're all coming together. So therefore, it makes sense to make that argument. But on top of chaf down on the base, but if we're going to say, gavra, but if you say we're coming to make the man a muad, meaning to say that in order to make a man a muad, you need 3 separate days. Limro Hanach Kamai, then the first witnesses could say, "Why are you making me pay full damages? Anan mi aviyadin and the basar shlosha yami." Also, how would I be supposed to know that after a couple of days we're going to have 3 more days? We're going to have the fourth guy coming, and then I'm going to have to do full damages. How am I going to know the basar shlosha yami also hani miyadile? So therefore, it's clear that what's this case referring to? That even that we're talking about a case that an ox can become a muad, even if the 3 witnesses come on one day. So Amar Rav Ashi, Amrisa Lashmaita Kameda Rav Kahana, when I said it's teaching in front of Kahana, no, it's the opposite also. Even if the three witnesses come all on the same day, why would it work? The last one could say, Ana Manaya Dina and the called the Kai Beidina Asude Besoraka. So how do I know that all these people came to court when they're testifying about an ox? And now Gavra Palgan and we just came to make him half damages. We don't know anything else that goes on the court. Where says no, we can answer that question by saying the Kamaramze Ramuzi. We saw that they had interaction with the other witnesses. Or Ravashi says Kishaboritsu from they all came together. And Ravina says we have a different way of understanding it. Ravina says the Mekirin Balashor. Ravina says, no, what we're talking about is where the witnesses recognize the owner of the donkey and they don't recognize the donkey itself. And so therefore they can't say we came to obligate him to pay the half damages on the tam because they don't know which ox it is. And ox only pays migufo. So therefore it has to be a case where they only know the owner. And so therefore clearly it's talking about that case. So they came to try to make the man a muad. So if that's the case, so well, if they don't know who the ox is, how can they ever declare it a muad? So Gemara says, no, the Amre Toran, the Gachna, Islach, Bevakar, Ibayachal, and Ture Bakar. They say, no, you have a goring ox in your yard, and you have to watch your whole yard. Okay, so now the Gemara asks the following question. So now let's say Reuven owns a dog. Shimon comes and incites Reuven's dog to bite Levi. So somebody who incites his friend's dog to bite a third party. Mahu, what will be the law? So the Gemara says under those circumstances, Mishasa Vadai Pater. The one who incited Reuven's dog, let's say Shimon incited Reuven's dog to bite Levi, he's for sure exempt. He's for sure exempt because it's called grama. He didn't actually damage. He caused something to happen. It's indirect, and by Nezikin, by damages, we say grama benezikin is potter. Indirect damages is exempt. But Baal Kelav Mai, what about the owner of the dog? Is Reuven who owns a dog? Is he going to be liable? Mi Amrina and Madzi Amrle, Ana Maya Vinnoe. Can he say, what did I do? Odilma Amrina Kivan the Adat Bekabachad the Mishasi Mishtasi Loy Bachal Ashuye. Or can we say to Reuven, you should have known that your dog could be incited to bite. And so therefore you should have been more careful. You shouldn't have kept it with you. So I'm Rabbi Zera Tashma, let's bring a proof. What's the definition of a tam? So that the children are able to play with the ox and it doesn't gore, which implies hanogeach chayev. So this implies that if it would gore, even though the children are playing with it, then he's liable. So we see even though a third party is inciting his ox to gore, he's still going to be liable. So therefore, that should answer that question. The Gemara says, no. Dilma, that doesn't mean that he's liable. Maybe it just means he's no longer a tam. It wouldn't be able to become a tam. Dilma hanagach will have a tam. No, it doesn't mean that he's liable. It just maybe doesn't refer to the tam status. Maybe with that goring, he's still not liable. So the Gemara says, okay, let's still try and answer this question. Let's say you incite the dog. She incite the dog, or you incite the snake to bite. Potter. Then he's exempt. My love, Pater Mishasa doesn't mean that the one who incited the animal is exempt, but the owner of the animal is liable. The Gemara says, no, Ema Pater af Mishasa. Maybe it means even the Mishasa is Pater in addition to the owner of the animal. So Rava says, okay, we didn't answer the question, but Rava says, I'll teach you a different halacha. Even if you want to say that, let's say Shimon comes along and incites Reuven's dog to bite Levi, he's liable. But if Shimon comes along and incites Reuven's dog, and as a result of that, the dog bites Shimon, means Shimon caused Reuven's dog to bite him, then we're going to say Reuven is exempt. Why? Because we have a principle. We've had this principle already. We had it back on the first daf. God will 23 days ago. Call Mashana Pater. Whoever does something unusual and that causes the other person money to damage him, then he's going to be exempt from the damages. Kol Mashana, whoever changes, and then somebody else comes and basically does a mashuna on him, does a goring on him, then unusual, he's exempt. And so therefore, since you incited the dog, you did something wrong. So therefore, the dog did something which was unusual and bit you. The owner of the dog is exempt. Papa Rava, Papa says, I have a similar teaching like Reish Lakish that says like you. Dam Reish Lakish, stay parot b'shus around. Let's say you have two cows in public. Two cows in public. Achas revutza, achas malachas. One is squatting, which is unusual. You're not supposed to squat in public. And the other one's walking. Uvata malachas beravutza. And then the animal that's walking, which it's allowed to do, kicks the one that's squatting. Petura. Then we're going to say is exempt because the one who was squatting had no right to squat there. So if your animal kicks it, your animal, it's doing something it shouldn't do. But your animal, the other animal, first, it's something it shouldn't do. But if the squatting one kicks the one that's walking, chayavis, and the squatting one is liable because the one who was walking did nothing unusual. Gemara says that Rava says, no, I don't think that's the same case as what I said. Rava says, I would actually say that the animal that kicked, the squatting animal, is itself liable. The Amrina way, because I could have said to him, yeah, the other animal is squatting, so that gives you the right to walk on my animal because it's in your way. But with vautebi, but you don't have the right to kick me. You don't have the right to kick my animal because my animal squatting there only gives you the right to walk on my animal, not to kick my animal. Okay, we'll stop the recording here, and God willing, we'll do the next stuff tonight at 7:20. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to address.